Terrence Williams, at 34 years old, knew the language of wood better than he knew the language of people. Wood didn't lie. It showed its grain, its weaknesses, its strengths. You just had to know how to look. He made $46,000 a year as a Finnish carpenter, a salary that felt honest but perpetually tight in a city like Atlanta. His hands, calloused and mapped with the fine lines of 1,000 tiny cuts, were his greatest asset. They could turn a chaotic pile of lumber into a staircase that flowed like water or cabinets that closed with a whisper-soft click. For the last 6 months, these hands had been dedicated to a single purpose: renovating his mother-in-law's house in College Park. Now, standing in the newly finished kitchen at 7:14 p.m. on a Tuesday, covered in a fine layer of drywall dust that clung to his deep brown skin, he felt a weariness that went bone deep. The renovation was finally done. Every wall was perfect. Every joint was tight. And he had poured every spare hour, every weekend, every ounce of his skill into this place, all for free. It was his gift, his investment in what his wife Jolene called our family's future. He had no idea how wrong he was. The project had started with promises whispered over their modest dinner table in their $1,200 a month apartment. Jolene, with her radiant smile and eyes that could sell sand in a desert, had laid out the plan. Her mother, Vivian, was ready to downsize. Her 2-bedroom bungalow in College Park, a neighborhood rich with Black history and culture, was structurally sound but dated. "If we could just fix it up?" "Baby," Jolene had said, her hand covering his on the worn laminate tabletop. "We could sell it for a huge profit. Mama would give us the extra money as a down payment on a real house. A house for us, in Buckhead." The word Buckhead hung in the air, a symbol of everything they weren't. Buckhead meant sprawling brick homes, manicured lawns, and a life far removed from their current reality, a reality where his $150 Red Wing boots were a major investment, and her collection of $300 Michael Kors bags was funded by careful budgeting. Terrence, who drove a 2012 Toyota Camry with 187,000 miles on it, saw the dream in her eyes and wanted to build it for her. He saw a future with a yard for a dog, maybe a room for a child. He saw a life where his skill could provide more than just enough to get by. So he agreed. What would you have done? Have you ever poured your heart into something for someone you love, only to wonder if they saw the effort or just the result? Share your story in the comments below. The first month was a blur of demolition and dust. Terrence worked his 8-hour shift for his construction company, then drove straight to the College Park bungalow. Working under the harsh glare of portable halogen lamps until well after midnight, Jolene would often be there when he arrived. A takeout container of something from a local spot, a $25 meal that was meant to fuel him for another 6 hours of labor. "You're amazing," she'd say, kissing his dusty cheek. "This is going to change everything for us." His own money, from their joint account, paid for the crowbars, the heavy-duty trash bags, the blade replacements for his reciprocating saw. A $450 expense here, a $200 expense there. It added up. His mother-in-law, Vivian, was a constant, unnerving presence. A woman whose elegance was as sharp as her tongue. She would walk through the gutted rooms in her pristine $400 Tory Burch flats, a look of faint disgust on her face. "Terrence, do be careful with that wall. The plumbing is in there," she'd say, as if he couldn't read a blueprint. He was a master carpenter. He knew where the plumbing was. He'd spent 2 full days carefully mapping the house's skeleton. "Of course, Vivian," he'd reply, his voice even, his focus on the chalk line he was snapping. Jolene would laugh it off. "Mama's just nervous. She can't see the vision like we can." But Terrence saw it clearly. Vivian didn't see a son-in-law building her a more valuable asset. She saw a laborer. The facade of their domestic normalcy began to crack under the strain. Weekends ceased to exist. They were just 2 more days to hang drywall or run electrical wiring, while their friends were going to cookouts or seeing movies at the AMC Phipps Plaza 14, a $17 a ticket experience. Terrence was on his hands and knees, laying subflooring. Jolene's visits grew less frequent. She had brunch plans, networking events for her marketing job, a life that continued while his was paused inside the dusty shell of the bungalow. She'd call him from one of those brunches, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses in the background. "How's it going, baby? Are you almost done with the messy part?" The messy part was the foundation of the entire project, the grueling, unseen work that made the pretty parts possible. One Saturday afternoon in the 3rd month, he was installing new baseboards, a task requiring precision and patience. He was using a top-of-the-line DeWalt miter saw, a $600 piece of equipment that was his pride and joy. Jolene arrived with 2 of her friends, women who looked like they'd never held a hammer in their lives. They were dressed for an afternoon in Buckhead, wearing flowing dresses that probably cost more than his saw. Jolene gestured grandly at the half-finished living room. "And this is where the new entertainment center will go. I'm thinking a nice white oak. Something really clean and modern." She didn't introduce Terrence, who was kneeling on the floor, covered in sawdust. One of her friends glanced at him. "Is that the contractor?" she asked, her voice dripping with condescension. Jolene waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, well, that's just Terrence. He's handling all the work." Just Terrence, not my husband, not the man making this all possible. He felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach, but he said nothing. He just made his cut, the blade screaming through a piece of poplar, the sound filling the sudden, awkward silence. He placed the perfectly mitered corner, a flawless 45-degree angle, and moved to the next piece. The wood didn't judge. The financial toll was becoming undeniable. The budget for materials, which Vivian had contributed a meager $15,000 to, was long gone. Terrence was now funding the project from their joint savings, the account that was supposed to be for their future house. He used his Home Depot credit card, racking up thousands of dollars in debt for high-end fixtures, Benjamin Moore paint at $80 a gallon, and solid maple for the custom kitchen cabinets he was building from scratch. "It's an investment, honey," Jolene assured him over the phone. "Every dollar we put in, we'll get 3 back. I promise." He wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her. So he kept working, his hands bleeding, his back aching, fueled by a promise that was starting to feel as hollow as the walls he was filling with insulation. The cruelty wasn't always overt. It was in the small things, the casual dismissals that chipped away at his sense of worth. It was in the way Vivian would leave a list of tasks on the kitchen counter, written on her expensive cream-colored stationery, as if he were an employee. 1. Fix the squeak in the hallway floor. 2. Adjust the pantry door. 3. I'll clean up your sawdust. There was never a please or a thank you. There was only expectation. One evening, deep into the 4th month, Terrence was painstakingly installing crown molding. It was a difficult 2-person job, but Jolene was at a work gala, a $250 a plate affair. He had rigged up a support system with a few pieces of scrap wood, but it was slow, frustrating work. He was balancing on a ladder, his arms burning, when Vivian walked in. She didn't offer to help. She just watched him for a moment, her arms crossed. "You know," she said, her voice cool and analytical, "my friend Eleanor had her whole house done by a professional crew. They were in and out in 6 weeks." Terrence paused, the nail gun heavy in his hand. He looked down at her from the ladder. "I am a professional, Vivian." She gave a small, on tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Of course, dear, it's just different when it's one person. Slower. She wasn't just commenting on the timeline. She was commenting on him, on his value. He was one man, not a crew. He was free labor, not a $50,000 contractor. He took a breath, turned back to the wall, and fired a nail perfectly into the stud. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Jolene's detachment grew with every finished room. As the house transformed from a construction site into a beautiful, modern home, she started treating it like her personal showroom. She'd bring different friends by, pointing out features as if she had designed them herself. "I chose this specific quartz for the countertops," she'd say, running her hand over the $4,500 slab of stone Terrence had nearly broken his back installing. "It has such a lovely, subtle veining." She never once said, "Terrence built these cabinets by hand," or "Terrence laid every single one of these subway tiles." His work, his skill, his sacrifice, it was all being absorbed into her narrative, her vision. He was becoming invisible in the very space he was creating. The most painful moment came near the end of the 5th month. It was their wedding anniversary. Terrence had worked a 12-hour day at the bungalow to finish the master bathroom, wanting to surprise Jolene. He installed the final piece of hardware on the vanity he'd built, a sleek, brushed nickel pull that cost $12. He cleaned the entire room, wiped down every surface, and stood back to admire his work. It was beautiful. He called Jolene, his heart full, expecting her to be excited. "Hey baby, I finished the bathroom. It looks incredible. You should come see it." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Oh?" "Terrence, I'm sorry. I completely forgot to tell you. I'm out with the girls. We're celebrating Ashley's promotion. We're at St. Cecilia." St. Cecilia, a restaurant where a single plate of pasta cost $50. "It's our anniversary, Jolene," he said, his voice quiet. The silence on the phone was heavy, suffocating. "Oh my God," she finally whispered. "Baby, I am so sorry. I've just been so swamped. Listen, I'll make it up to you. We'll celebrate this weekend." But this weekend, like all the others, was for the house. He hung up the phone and sat on the edge of the brand new $800 bathtub he had just installed. The room was silent except for the sound of his own breathing. He looked at his hands, the source of all this creation, and for the first time he felt a profound and terrifying loneliness. The house wasn't a symbol of their future anymore. It was a monument to his erasure. The final weeks were a frantic push. A realtor had been engaged, and photos were scheduled. Jolene was suddenly present again, but her presence was that of a director, not a partner. She pointed out microscopic flaws he had already planned to fix. "There's a tiny paint drip on this trim, Terrence. The photographer will see that." She followed him from room to room, a walking punch list, her anxiety and ambition radiating off her. He worked silently, methodically, his heart encased in a layer of cold resignation. He finished the last task, adjusting a closet door so it closed without a sound, at 6:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. He packed up most of his tools, in leaving only a small toolbox with a few essentials he'd need for final touch-ups. He was exhausted, but a small part of him felt a flicker of pride. He had taken a worn-out old house and made it new again. He had kept his promise. What he didn't know was that Jolene had never intended to keep hers. The discovery happened on a Friday afternoon, 2 weeks after he'd finished the work. It was October 2nd at 3:47 p.m. The air was crisp, carrying the first real hint of autumn. Terrence had gotten a call from Jolene. "The stager is coming tomorrow morning and the photographer is right after. Can you please go over and make sure everything is perfect? and grab the rest of your tools? They can't be in the photos." Her voice was cheerful, excited. He agreed, a familiar sense of duty overriding his fatigue. He drove his Camry to the College Park bungalow, letting himself in with the key he still had. The house was silent and immaculate. The afternoon sun streamed through the new, energy-efficient windows he'd installed, illuminating the dust-free surfaces and gleaming hardwood floors he had sanded and refinished himself. It smelled of fresh paint and lemon cleaner, not of sawdust and sweat. It already felt like it belonged to someone else. He walked through the rooms, a ghost in his own creation. He checked the cabinet doors, the faucets, the light switches. Everything was perfect. His last toolbox was sitting in the corner of the master bedroom, right where he'd left it. As he bent to pick it up, he noticed a manila folder sitting on the new nightstand he had built. It was thick and official looking, with the logo of a prominent Atlanta real estate appraisal company on it. Curiosity, sharp and unwelcome, pricked at him. This had to be the appraisal Jolene had ordered to set the selling price. He knew he shouldn't look, that it was an invasion of privacy, but a gut feeling, a cold dread, compelled him. His hands, which could measure a cut to a 1/16 of an inch, trembled slightly as he opened the clasp. He scanned the first few pages: property details, square footage, comparable sales in the neighborhood. Then he got to the valuation summary. His eyes widened. The pre-renovation value was listed at $210,000. The post-renovation appraised value was $325,000. He had single-handedly added $115,000 to the value of the home. A surge of pride, fierce and bright, washed over him. He had done that. His skill, his labor. It was real, all quantifiable value. He kept reading, flipping through the pages, a small smile on his face. And then he saw it. It was on an addendum page, under a section titled Summary of Improvements and Capital Contributions. There was a detailed list of the renovations: new kitchen, 2 new bathrooms, refinished floors, new lighting, custom cabinetry. Next to each item was a cost estimate, totaling the material costs he knew were mostly paid from their joint account. But it was the line at the bottom that made the air leave his lungs. It read, Owner Equity Contribution, Labor, J. Williams, $114,250. J. Williams, Jolene Williams. He read it again and again. The letters seemed to blur on the page. She had not only taken credit for his 6 months of grueling, unpaid labor, but she had quantified it and claimed it as her own financial contribution. It wasn't our investment. It wasn't a family project. In the cold, hard language of a legal document, it was her equity. The whispers about their future in Buckhead, the takeout dinners, the praise. It was all a lie, a calculated, meticulously documented lie. He felt a profound, sickening cold spread through his chest. He was not her partner. He was an asset to be exploited. Just then, he heard the front door open. "Terrence, are you here?" It was Vivian. She walked into the bedroom, stopping short when she saw him standing there with the folder in his hand. Her eyes narrowed. "What are you doing with that?" she asked, her voice sharp. Terrence couldn't speak. He just held up the page, the damning line item visible. He watched her face. There was no surprise, no confusion. There was only a flash of annoyance, as if he had caught her in a minor social faux pas. She sighed, a sound of pure exasperation. She walked over, plucked the folder from his numb fingers, and placed it back on the nightstand. She straightened a wrinkle in the duvet he had just smoothed out. Then she looked at him, her expression one of utter dismissal. "Don't be so dramatic," she said. "You were just the handyman." Just the handyman. 3 words. 3 words that took 6 months of his life, his love, his body-breaking labor, and reduced it to a simple transaction where he was the only one who hadn't been paid. 3 words that confirmed he was nothing more than a tool to be used and discarded. In that moment, something inside Terence broke. But what grew in its place was not rage.